Hey, PreSales Collective, it's your host, James Kaikis, and today I'm going to be joined by Paul Harris, Principal Solutions Architect at Loftware and PreSales Collective Ambassador. The topic of today's episode is the intriguing similarities between professional athletes and solutions professionals. Yes, we are talking about sports today, or sports ball for many of you, but I promise this is not an episode about sports. This is an episode about peak performance. And so today's episode, Paul and I are going to discuss the similarities in pro athletes, musicians, people that are at the top of their game, and how solutions professionals can relate to peak performance. We are especially going to get into the topic of onboarding and setting people up for success. So while you might read the title and say, oh, they're going to talk about sports the entire time, that is not today's episode. We definitely do continue that thread throughout the concept, but the examples really lead to our main premise of peak performance. Enjoy.
Today's episode is sponsored by Consensus. Scale your pre-sales organization and deliver better experiences with intelligent demo automation. Experience an interactive video demo at goconsensus.com.
Hi there, my name is Yuji Higashi, co-founder of PreSales Collective, and I have big news to share with you if you're a pre-sales leader or an individual contributor early in your career. We recently launched 2 training and enablement programs aimed at helping you take your career to the next level. Both programs were created by pre-sales leaders with input from dozens of SC veterans across our community. Now, we'll be running cohorts each month, so if you're interested in participating, visit us at presalescollective.com/enablement to submit an inquiry, and we'll send you details about each program, including this curriculum and schedule. We look forward to working with you on growing your career and being part of your career journey. Thank you, and I hope to see you soon.
Paul, welcome to the PreSales Podcast. How are you today?
James, it's great to see you. I'm doing really, really well. But as you know, I'm sat here with maybe one foot out the door because I've got a baby on the way very, very soon.
Congratulations on the newest addition to the family. Going into the recording, I was like, I hope Paul shows up, but if he doesn't show up, I'm be really excited for him because that means that he's on his way to the hospital for the new arrival. So congratulations to you and the family. Very excited for you to bring in baby number 2 to the family.
Thanks, James. I really appreciate it. Like I said, it's a really exciting time. And congratulations to you too. You know, I think we've just gone past 2 years of the podcast, 125 episodes. We've known each other a long time, kind of going way back to the early days of COVID and lockdown. And being involved and following that journey that PreSales Collective has been on and following the podcast a long time, it's a real pleasure to be on here now.
I appreciate that, Paul. That means a lot. It's been a fun journey and appreciate you being along for the ride. When I was thinking about this podcast, I was also thinking about how we got to meet in person last year as well. And it's just been wonderful to see the PreSales Collective continue to bring people together and just, be able to come over to London. I think I've been there 3 or 4 times since the start of PreSales Collective. So it's been nice seeing the community and building relationships. I'll definitely miss you at London this time, but looking forward to the next time.
Me too, James. Like I say, sad to miss it, but I think everyone gets it. There's sometimes we have to put other things first, and I'm sure it will be a great event.
One thing before we get started in the episode, you have made a commitment to getting more active on social. Talk to me about how that experience is going.
So back in August, I kind of said, hey, look, I want to start putting myself out there a little bit more, using my LinkedIn a little bit better, not just following stuff. And it's going really well. I will say it's very hard work, and respect to anybody who puts out content regularly that's interesting and engaging, but it's going really well. I've seen some super interesting engagement. The conversations that drives has really made me want to keep going.
I appreciate your commitment to the profession because you're right. It's a lot of hard work and it takes intention. It takes repeatability. And I think you've done a great job continuing to talk about the profession. So kudos to you on that. So as we get started in today's episode, let's talk about you and your career journey. What got you to where you are today?
So like all solutions professionals, I went to college and did a liberal arts degree with the intention of obviously coming into this. It was liberal arts with a decision of, I wonder where this is going to take me. And then kind of out of that, came up through a variety of different IT roles, moving through support, implementation. Then, hey, one day someone said, you should come and try pre-sales. And like a lot of people, I went, I ain't a sales guy. I still remember being in that first meeting and it was like the scales fell from my eyes. And I went, oh, I'm that guy. I'm the one that gets to come in and sound really intelligent. oh, this is all right. This is all right. So that's then taken me through to where I am today, going through a variety of different pre-sales roles, and now in a principal solution architect role, which is really exciting because what that means is, as well as getting to help build out great solutions for my customers, I'm also doing a lot internally, building out internal programs and really helping to lift up those other SEs and solutions professionals in my team.
Congrats on a great journey. I know that I've had a firsthand view of your experience over the last couple of years and excited for what you're doing in the principal role, which we're going to maybe get into a little bit today. So let's talk about today's topic, the intriguing similarities between professional athletes and solutions professionals. In this example, we're going to talk about professional athletes. So, Paul, why are we talking about professional athletes on the PreSales podcast?
Well, James, as you know, and as you say, we've known each other for quite some time. I love learning lessons from outside of our profession. And I'm a big believer in that. And anyone who follows my content, who's seen anything that I've put out, knows that that's where I think we can learn the most. And pro athletes, right? You can't think of a higher performer. There's no one that is pushing themselves, that's always saying, hey, can I get a little bit more of an edge as a fellow F1 fan? We're talking real margins to just make that tiny bit of a difference. And maybe for those that don't know that, think about when you watch the 100-meter sprint. You know, you're tenths of a second to go from being a gold medalist to being no one that someone remembers.
We've talked about this before. It's just the details. When you're at the top of your game, right? Whether you're a professional soccer player, you're a track star, you're an F1, you are at the top of the world. And so the difference in, like you said, gold to bronze to not even qualifying is sometimes just so small that it's all the intention and actions and effort that you put in to get to that result. And I have a couple of other examples I'm going to get to momentarily, but why do pro athletes relate to solutions professionals?
Anyone who's in solutions knows that it's a high stakes game with a very high reward. Being in sales, we're kind of going in there. If we don't win, we're not going to succeed. That's our goal. And if you're not getting your name up in lights, if you're not kind of coming out of the deal winning and celebrating, you feel like you've lost and it feels like the worst thing in the world. But on a more kind of positive note, we can also learn a lot from when things maybe don't go to plan. We can look at, okay, things didn't go quite so well this time, so maybe I just need to make a few small adjustments and let's see how that result changes.
I've got a favorite quote that my team is so tired of me saying, is that the details are the difference between good and great. And I firmly believe that. And I learned this early in my career, is that these small adjustments and small changes can have a massive impact on our end result. And so as we talk about pro athletes, you mentioned F1, Formula One, for those who may not be into racing, car racing. You might be driving for 2 hours, and the difference between the fastest lap could be 100th or 1,000th of a second. These are the smallest details that really make an impact and make a difference. And when you add them up and when you compound them, I believe that's when you start to separate yourself. If I think about some of the solutions professionals from my career, they just did everything right. Some of the best people I ever worked with, they just did all the small things right, and it adds up and makes a difference. So while we're talking about pro athletes, Paul, I want to get your perspective on this. I have talked a lot about how I believe that solutions professionals, I love the pro athlete example, but they're also musicians, right? You're on stage. It's a performance, and you practice for that performance so that when you're on stage, it is near perfection. And I feel like in technology, some companies have kind of lost that. They've kind of played this volume game and they just kind of show up, throw up, right, is the term for it. And they're like, oh, I know how to do this. It becomes a little bit of a sloppy experience. And if you start to think about your sales team and the extended sales team, it's almost like an orchestra. You need to have everyone in sync, doing their part, playing together for a beautiful end product. I've always approached sales with this mindset, right? And always kind of ingrained this into my sales team and my solutions team. So I'm curious if you have perspective on this.
I love that. I think that's a really good analogy. And I think if you kind of take a step back, thinking about musicians, like they are practicing and rehearsing for hundreds and hundreds of hours for a concert that maybe lasts 2 hours. So you're thinking there's a huge amount of time and effort going into making that a success. but it's only as much of a success because of the amount of time they put into that. And we see the same in solutions, right? And you mentioned, and I totally agree. I think we're all guilty of, at some point, of complacency, of kind of feeling, hey, look, you know what, I can just wing this one. But we all probably know that doesn't always go to plan. And I love the musicians thing as well, right? Because you look at a symphony and orchestra, what are they doing? They're following a script. They have sheet music in front of them. They've got a conductor. He's saying, this is when we go up, this is when we go down. But they know when they've got to play. They know what everyone else is playing. But they also know that the part they play is just as important as every single other part.
Absolutely. And that's a great point. And I think as we continue to talk about the importance of team selling and bringing your extended team, everyone playing a role within a meeting or a call or a sales cycle is really important. We're going to continue to talk about this pro athlete aspect of things. So we're talking about pro athletes in peak performance, making sure that you are on the top of your game. You're doing all the details and small things right. But we both care about a topic of onboarding. And there are some similarities when it comes to professional athletes and onboarding of solutions professionals. So why don't you share your perspective with us, Paul?
There's a lot here. The first thing, and anyone who's listening to this, anyone who's a hiring manager, has had any involvement in hiring people, particularly recently, will know that's a very long, very complex, and very expensive process. And when professional athletes, particularly those that are playing in soccer teams, in football teams, in basketball teams, we are talking hundreds of millions of dollars that's being exchanged to move someone from one team to another. So if you're a company, you're spending probably not that level of money, but still a significant amount of money on going out, on finding the right people, on bringing them in, you want to make sure that you're equipping them to be as successful as they can be. Because if you don't, it's like bringing in a top tier athlete into your team. You bring Ronaldo onto your soccer team, but you never train him. You just say, turn up on Sunday, go out and play.
Yeah, it's a good example.
And we all know that that's not going to be successful, right? You're going to train him. And it's the same thing with onboarding. Equally, though, to kind of turn it around, it's not just about the company and the manager. It's also about the IC. It's also about that individual. And if you're an IC listening, if you've just started in a new role, if you're looking for a new job, or even next time you go into a new company, bear in mind that, you know, you own that as well. And it's your job to turn up and to practice as much as it is that company to equip you with those tools to ensure that success happens.
I really like this example, Paul. I think it's a great example because if we think about, you're right, pro athletes, the amount of money that is spent to bring someone from one team to another based off their past performance, your hope is that they're going to increase their performance and grow and impact the others around them, right? If you bring on a world-class soccer or football player, when you hope that that person joins the team, he or she is making a dramatic impact on the wins, on the others around them, making them better. And that's what happens, right, when you bring somebody onto the organization. But it's in our best interest to make sure that that person is set up for success. And, you know, that's a really important aspect of onboarding that I think a lot of people miss. Truthfully, we talk about this a lot in our new Leader Elevate program that Tom Bant and I are instructors on. There has to be a really well-defined philosophy around onboarding to set somebody up for success. Because as you mentioned, if they come in and you don't set them up for success, well, is that your fault or is it the IC's fault? Is it the company's fault? How are you helping them meet or exceed expectations? So let's talk about this philosophy of onboarding, because I think it is really interesting to this conversation. So what is your philosophy as it relates to onboarding?
I think that's a really interesting question, James. And I think philosophy is the right way to think about it. And you touched on it there in that I think for me, the place where often onboarding programs go wrong is they focus too much on product. They focus too much on bringing somebody in and just teaching them what the product is. The problem there is that, yeah, you might have a product expert, but you don't really have any idea if they know actually how to go and sell that. Knowing a product, being an expert, being able to like meticulously document and train somebody is a very, very good skill, but it's a very, very different skill to going and selling that. The way I always approach onboarding is I go, it should look at the whole picture. You should be trying to ensure that they learn the product, ensure that they get what they need to know to go out and be successful in opportunities. But equally, you need to be looking at all the skills that relate to that. And we all know what the current market is like, where it's very difficult to hire, and companies are having to look maybe to non-traditional avenues. There's a webinar just last week with PreSales Collective talking about hiring from non-traditional avenues. And when you're doing that, you're bringing in some really great raw talent. But if all you do is bring a teacher into your organization as a solutions professional, you go and teach them your products, but you don't give them any enablement on how to sell it, yeah, sure, they're going to be one of the best trainers your organization's ever had, but they're probably going to struggle to be a good solutions professional or to be the best that they could be.
This is such a great aspect, and I'm so happy you brought this up because this is something that we've been very, very focused on with PreSales Academy because companies want to partner with us and hire this non-traditional talent. And our first question is, what does your onboarding experience look like? How are you going to set these people up for success? Because a lot of times, to your point, they bring somebody on and they don't have a good onboarding program that's going to set this person up for success. The expectations are too high. They throw them into the wild and they may sink or swim. And if they end up sinking and they leave the profession, it doesn't do anybody any good. I'm the type of leader that has always held people back a little bit more than they want. I want you chomping at the bit. I want you being like, James, I'm ready to go to the field. Put me out there. I'm always willing to do that. But my thought, Paul, is that if I send somebody out too early and they're not set up for success and they do a bad demo, they have a bad call, the interaction with the AE goes wrong, I've put them at a disadvantage. And then I have to spend the next couple of months fixing their confidence, fixing the account executive confidence, and building that relationship back up to success. And so I'd much rather hold someone back a little bit longer, make sure they have everything that they need to feel comfortable, to feel confident. Sometimes you got to give them a little bit of a push, but it puts them in a position to succeed so that once they are off, they're off and running. And that's really, really important to me. At most of the companies that I've worked with, I've developed a new onboarding process from the smallest companies to the biggest companies, at least for my team, that were built with intention. And so I know that as part of your principal role, you're looking at the onboarding process at Loftware. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. And it's really fortuitous because we've actually just launched this. So as you say, when I came into this role, one of the first things that my director gave me to do was he said, we need to have a better onboarding experience. We're growing the team. The company's grown. We've brought several different companies together and everyone has a slightly different approach to it. So let's take a step back. Let's strip it back to basics. I came at it with all those things we've been talking about, right? Setting people up for success, giving people the tools they need to succeed, but also really focusing on what those areas should be. And also for managers, making sure that they know what they're doing. So the onboarding program now that we've just brought in at Loftware is a 30, 60, 90-day program. So it's very intense. It's not something that I would want to enter into lightly. But the idea is taking the average onboarding time for SEs, maybe 9, maybe 12 months to be fully ramped. And I think that's a number a lot of organizations would see, bringing that down to 90 days. Saying from day 1 to day 90, you're going to be someone who can go out. That's not to say that we're going to take the stabilizers off and just let you roam free and not have any support, but it's also about building a continuous cycle of feedback. And it's by putting in those 30, 60, and 90, those feedback sessions that are very, very carefully structured to, on the one hand, allow people to demonstrate what they've learned, but also for us as a leadership team to look and go, hey, here's something we never knew James could do. Here's a really great avenue. And it already starts. And one thing I think that's been so great about PreSales Collective is kind of opening people's eyes to the different career paths that you can take as a solutions professional, right? It starts to give you a chance to demonstrate those areas really early on in those really early days to help your manager and their manager go, oh, hey, maybe this is something that they're really good at. And it starts to really set you up for success for that future journey.
Can you expand a bit more on the feedback? Because I know that you have a philosophy around the manager's role and coaching and different things along the onboarding journey.
So the way that we've structured it is that at those 3 milestones, that SE is going to do an internal presentation. We're going to build it. Can start fairly straightforward, presenting the product, maybe the value proposition, and that's then going to get built out. In that audience, you're going to have their manager, maybe the director, and then also we're going to try and bring in people from sales as well, because it's really important we start to cultivate that relationship. And it's really there not to provide an assessment of someone, but really for the manager to go, am I as a manager giving this person everything they need? And I think, like you, I've been a manager myself. It's very, very easy to get kind of caught up in that day-to-day whirlwind of emails and meetings and escalations and expense reports. And actually, when you bring someone on board, it's all too easy just to let them, as you said earlier, just sort of let them float off and then maybe have a bad experience. And so it's about giving managers a way of saying, right, here's what your role is, here's what you're accountable for, but also here's the way you're going to do it. And when you bring someone in, giving you a framework, we're not going to tell you what to tell people, but just giving you kind of a framework and saying, well, these are the kind of things that you should be looking for, because it's subjective as well, right? Everyone has a different view of what a good SE is. And so it's starting to acknowledge that as well as helping ICs and new starters come in, it's also about helping managers as coaches. And again, if we come back to the example of Formula One, anyone who's watched a race, you'll know there's 20 drivers on track. This is single-seater racing. There's then a team of maybe 50, 70 people who are there at the track. They're the pit crew that you see. They're the people giving them all the data. But then back in the factory, there are hundreds of people that are all there, that are all working towards that one individual's success. And that's all got to be coordinated. And that's where I see the manager as well. It's been that coach, it's been that person that has access to all these different parts of the company, all these different tools, all these different levers they can pull. And it's their role to move them in the right direction that's going to set that individual up for the best success.
Paul, this is so fascinating. For the leaders listening, how do you know that you have a good onboarding process where you're active, engaged, and giving the feedback that you're mentioning along that journey?
So I think there's a few different factors. It kind of comes down to how are you measuring success in your team? And we know that there's a measurement around how successful are they being at selling. That's all soft feedback that you're getting. If you put a new SE out on their first opportunity and you get that email back from the AE that says this person absolutely smashed it, you know that clearly you've done something right. And there's clearly gone something right. There's maybe a little bit of alchemy that's happened there. You clearly put them in the right place at the right time. But clearly you've done something right as well as a manager. But the thing that's probably more forefront and more immediate for managers is to think about retention. And this is where I get really passionate about onboarding and about that kind of ongoing experience. Because going back to pro athletes, right? Pro athletes, they're in very high demand. The top performers are in very high demand. And every transfer window that comes up, there's always gossip. There's always who's going to go where. And are they happy where they are? Are they getting paid enough? Are they being given a good enough experience? And that's really important to managers as well. Retention is really, really key. I've already touched on how hard it is to hire. You put that money out, you now want to hold on to that person. So not to sort of say, well, maybe if you're not keeping people, it's your onboarding. But if you're looking and if you're thinking, how do I make sure that when I'm bringing people in, that they want to not just stay in my organization, but they want to stay in my team, they want to stay in my solutions team, in my pre-sales team, then really pay attention to that onboarding program. Maybe go and speak to the last 2 or 3 people that joined the company, get their feedback and ask them to be honest. Because I think, people should be honest. And if your manager listens to this and you're listening and they come to you that question, be honest, right? Because they're looking for your help. And I think that's really key. And again, the other thing with pro athletes, right? The best coaches and the best performers, they're co-pilots, right? We talk about sales and pre-sales being co-pilots. Players and coaches should be co-pilots as well. You've got to work in lockstep. You've got to be honest with each other. And you've got to be willing to raise your hand if you feel like something's maybe not going as well as it could.
I like all the points you made, Paul, because I think it's really important to be open and honest. Sometimes in your onboarding experience, it's a new company, you have the rose-colored glasses on, you think everything's perfect, or there's some trouble and you go to your manager and your manager acts like everything's okay. The reality is every company, no matter how big or small you are, there's always room and areas to improve. I'm happy you highlighted that. And one thing I want to mention that's important and core to me, and again, something Tom and I talk about at Leader Elevate, is my belief is as a manager, And as, the quote unquote coach or captain, your job is to make everyone better around you. We talked about this. And I try not to do too many sports examples, but in professional basketball in the US, there's an individual by the name of Chris Paul, who many might know from the State Farm commercials. He has been a top performer for his entire career. And there are specific examples when he goes to a new team, how much better that team does with lack of talent. Like, it's unbelievable to look at that impact that he has on the people around him with the talent. Teams do exponentially better than they're expected to when he joins that organization. And, I think if we reflect back on our organizations, there are team members that have that kind of impact on the team. They have an impact on the organization. If we think about our role as managers, right, or coaches, we should have that impact on our employees and help them reach their potential and be the best versions of themselves. I really like this aspect of pro athletes, but really of top performance, right? I think that's the key that we're talking about here, is this concept of top performance and how it relates to our jobs. I want to close with some advice questions. Let's start with the individual contributor. So, Paul, I'm an individual contributor. I've just joined my company. I'm going through my onboarding process. I don't feel maybe I have exactly what I need to set me up for success. What advice do you have for those individuals who might not be feeling super supported in their onboarding process?
The first thing, James, is to say to them, well done for recognizing that. If that's where your head is at, you've already taken that first step. I think that's really, really key. The second thing to do is just take a step back, take a breath, maybe write down, go for a walk, just think through. Something I like to do is I sort of sometimes role play conversations in my head and just think, okay, I need to sit down and talk this out. I'm going to go to my manager and they're going to say, yeah, absolutely, I'm going to give you some help. What is it you need from me? Is the question they're going to ask you. And you need to think, what are you going to say that you want? What is it that you are saying, I feel I need more of this? Maybe you feel you need more time shadowing someone in the team. Maybe you feel you need some more direct product training. Maybe you feel you need some industry training. Whatever that is, make sure that you go into that conversation, and you should have that conversation now or as soon as possible. Don't wait on it. Don't think, oh, I'll wait till after Thanksgiving. I'll wait till after Christmas, right? Have that conversation now. Don't be afraid of what your manager's going to think, because I tell you now, they will thank you for bringing that to their attention.
What advice do you have for the managers out there who might be in the same position that you were, where you're looking at your onboarding, you're looking at your organization and saying, we probably could do better?
You need to set a North Star. You need to go, where do we want to get to? What is our kind of end goal? And I think it comes back to something I always say, which is the shoot for the moon, you end up in the stars. You have to think, where is it you want to get to? Because if you try and look at what's going to happen right in front of you, you'll get there, but then you'll not know where to go next. So you have to think, is my goal that I completely eliminate churn from my team? Is that my North Star? Do I raise the performance? You were talking about there about a basketball coach. Is that the performance that I get? Have I come in and am I going to radically change how quickly I can get someone in the field and get them closing millions of dollars worth of deals? What is it you're aiming for? Once you've got that, then start to kind of work backwards from that and work out the steps to get there. Look holistically, speak to your team members. If you're a leader, if you have managers reporting to you, speak to them, get them to speak to their teams to kind of find out what is it that people want, what are the areas they feel they need help on, and then start to work your way back up towards that goal. And you'll find that very quickly things will start to fall into place because you know what you're aiming for. You have that goal, and keeping that goal in mind will get you there.
Paul, great advice. I really appreciate both those aspects. It's been a pleasure having you on the podcast today. Congratulations to you and the newest addition to your family. Thanks for all the support that you've given me and the PreSales Collective over the last couple of years. It's been a wild journey, and I'm super happy to have gotten to know you and built a relationship with you and seen all your success within your career.
Thanks, James. It's been a pleasure.
All right, PreSales Collective. I really enjoyed talking to Paul about the similarities between professional athletes and solutions professionals on today's episode. As I mentioned in the opening, Yes, we talked about sports and gave sports examples throughout, but this wasn't an episode about sports per se. It was an episode about peak performance and top performers. And if you think about anyone who's a professional at what they do, they are the best. They are the best because they do everything really, really well. And if we think about professional athletes or professional musicians, they practice so that their end product is always as close to perfect as it can be. But there's always room to improve. There's always room to grow. And as we talk about this topic as it relates to onboarding, we need to set up new employees for success. We need to be able to create an environment for them to come into our organizations, to have very specific tasks that they need to do so that they can be on their way to peak performance. There's so many times we hire individuals, we say, oh, they've got the experience, they'll figure it out. And then 3 to 6 months later, we're sitting here like, well, was it my fault? Was it the employee's fault? Is it the company's fault that they're not meeting or exceeding expectations? That is why onboarding is such a critical part to setting somebody up for success. So I really enjoyed Paul's perspective on onboarding, his philosophy and setting people up for success, and the manager or coach's role in gathering feedback and ensuring somebody is progressing. So if you're doing something with onboarding that you think is really unique or really successful, please reach out to me. You know, I'm always looking to get feedback on what some of the best companies are doing. All right, PreSales Collective, our upcoming events can be found in our member hub. Don't forget to use connections to connect with pre-sales professionals all over the globe, and we will see you next week.